Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Hi everybody, my name's Amber and I'm an alcoholic addict. Hi, I think. I'd like to thank Patty for asking me to speak. I was dodging secretaries since I hit a year, and we don't come to Sunday night meetings, so I didn't know Patty was a secretary, so I figured when she said, Ever, she was going to give me a hug, like she always gives me, and says, hi, how are you? Well, she gave me a hug and said, how are you? And then she hit me with it, And I told her, I can't do that. But I was taught not to turn down an AA request, so I was taught to suit up and show up, so here I am. Now, where to begin? I've had 2 weeks to think about it and had all kinds of things to say, and I don't have nothing to say now. So, okay. Also, for the newcomers, I knew I was going to have to give up my age to everybody. And that ain't right either. But, I said, I can't do that either, but, I got to. So, I drank for 45 years, and I used drugs for 35 years. And I started drinking when I was 3, so I'm 48. I used to go to my grandparents' house, and my grandpa he'd be sitting in his easy chair, and he'd say, go get a glass from your grandma. And I'd say, right on. And I was on a mission at the age of 3, actually. And I'd run in and get a glass from my grandmother, go back, and Grandpa would put me in his lap in his easy chair, and TV would be on. He'd have his quart of beer. He'd fill up my glass, and me and Grandpa drink beer and watch TV together. And I think the reason why he did that is so I'd pass out and wouldn't bug him, because every time I go over there, me and Grandpa drank beer. So by the age of 5, I was drinking beer with Grandpa and vodka out of the bottle with Uncle Arnold. He didn't even put it in a glass. He just gave me the bottle. So I was well on my way. At the age of 13, and drugs is a part of my story, it's like drugs and alcohol for me is like salt and pepper, mashed potatoes and gravy, mom and dad, where one was, the other one was. So I started doing reds and whites at the age of 13, and that's when I started running away from home and getting into trouble. By the time I was 15, I was in Central Juvenile Hall for a few weeks because my mother signed incorrigible papers on me, and I thought, they just don't understand. I'm not incorrigible, but they thought I was. But she finally got me out of there, and I ended up doing like 3.5 years juvenile formal probation because of drugs and alcohol. By the time I hit 18, my first marriage, I was selling heroin, pot, reds, whites, and acid out of my house. My first husband had it all going on, and never got any sleep because you had the heroin addicts waking you up in the middle of the night for a fix, and then you had the speed freaks waking up in the morning because they needed to get up and go, and then you had the ones who wanted to trip, and they'd be popping up all the time, so you never got any rest. It was really confusing, you know what I'm saying? And then every once in a while you have police knocking on the door trying to catch you, so it was really crazy, and that was a real crazy marriage for me, but because of the drugs and alcohol. And the beatings that I took from that man, I decided I had had enough. So when I told him one day I was leaving him, and he told me I wouldn't walk out of there, and I did, and he shot me in the leg with a .45 when I went out on a stretcher. So, and then he had the nerve to make me, come back home. So that's what my life was, was all about, up to that age. And then, let's see. Then I continued to do drugs and alcohol, and I didn't finish school. I quit. And then I did a lot of geographics. I lived in about 8 different states. And when I moved to Ohio, I thought, out in the boonies, we were at the end of the electric pole, and and I'm serious. And we had to, our well was dry, so we had to buy a pump water up out of the creek into the well and use it for a holding tank. And I even had to hand fill my washer. I said, "Where's the covered wagon?" But it was bad. But I lived up where Ohio and West Virginia and Pennsylvania meet up in the Panhandle. So I finally convinced my ex-husband, that I needed some drugs, So he felt sorry for me because I did the little pout and went and talked to him, so he gave in. And took me to Wheeling, West Virginia, and I bought my first drugs on the courthouse steps of Wheeling, West Virginia. And I said, these people are really, really bold. But I started selling dope and transporting it from, I'd go once a month to Brooklyn, New York, and buy an ounce of crack and take it back and sell it. And the first things I started drinking when I was 18 was I used to drink Red Ripple. And then I went to beer, case of beer a day for a long time. And I attended bar for 14 years, so I used to, have people will buy you a drink, so I'd have them all over the bar, because I always drank my drink with whoever bought it for me, so I'd just go down to the bar and talk, drink some of my drink, and then I'd go on to the next drink. So I was always drunk. But, where was I going? But in Wheeling, I sold my dope in Wheeling, and I switched from beer to Thunderbird. I loved my Thunderbird. Don't touch my Thunderbird, because we'd have to fight. I'm serious. Don't touch my Thunderbird. You can drink my Budweiser, but don't touch my Thunderbird. And and so I was smoking crack, drinking Thunderbird, and taking Reds to go to sleep. So, I was real confused. And every once in a while I'd do some acid in between there just to change it, because I kind of get bored. But my ex-husband and me came into like $45,000 while we lived in Ohio. And need I say, and this is amazing, but the truth, in 3.5 weeks we were broke. We spent $45,000, and the biggest part of it went on drugs and alcohol, and it was too much. So I left. I have a little girl. She'll be 12 Christmas Day, and I took her, and I left and went to Phoenix, Arizona, where my mom lived. And after I got to Phoenix, 22 days later, my mother died. So it was just me and my little girl. And so that was all the reason more to drink and get high. And her dad came to see her from Ohio about 3 weeks after my mother died. And he kidnapped my little girl and took off. So that really devastated me. I lost my mom, didn't know where my little girl was. So I really fell into the bottle and into the drug life. And I came back to California. And I kicked my whole family to the curb. My sister, my brother, my nieces, my nephew, my great nieces, all of them, aunts, my uncles. Nobody knew where I was at for 7 years. And I pretty much, I had a very low bottom, a very, very, very low bottom. And for 7 years, I sold drugs and did whatever it was I had to do to get the money to rent my rooms, to have my alcohol, to have my dope. And the only thing I needed, I didn't need nothing from any women. You had nothing I wanted. The only thing I needed from you men was in your wallet, in your bottle, or on your pipe. That's it. That's all. I became very, very, very isolated. I could go and buy my Thunderbird, buy my crack, go home, and I'd fill up my bubble bath, and I had my little tray and my little drawing pens and stuff, and I'd sit in the bathtub and smoke my dope and drink my Thunderbird and listen to Mega 100 for hours. For hours I would do that, and when my water get cold, I'd just drain a little bit out and put a little bit more hot in. I was the cleanest person in the world. Because I've spent hours in the tub. And don't knock on my door and interrupt my bubble bath and my Thunderbird and my crack, because I get real mad. So people learned how to stay away. I refused to call my family. I didn't want them to see me like I was. So I refused to call them. And my sister, actually, when I finally did call my sister, which I'll get to in a little bit, they thought I was dead and that they would never see me again. I put my family through a lot of hell, which they didn't deserve. But the way I looked at it, they just didn't understand, and it was all their fault and poor me. So I had me, my Thunderbird, and my crack, and I was straight. That's how I looked at it. But so I would do what I had to do, and then I started in '98. I started going to jail. And it took 46 years for me to get my first felony. I said, why now? I went through all this time. I got away with it all. Why am I getting caught now? What am I doing wrong? I thought I was slicker than that, but for some reason, it started. And the detective that busted me for possession and under the influence, his name was Detective Ibel from Lameda. And he stopped me one day, and he says, Amber, he said, I'm worried about you. And I looked at him and I said, why are you worried about me? I said, don't you have anything better to do? I asked him, don't they pay you good? Do you need money for coffee and donuts or something? And he just looked at me and shook his head. He said, I'm going to save you from yourself. I went, oh my God, this man ain't going to go away. And every time I turned around, there he'd be. And and I asked him one day if he had radar on me somewhere, that if I was at a high or something, and he managed to tab me with some radar, keep up with me, because he was always there. So he busted me, and then 3 weeks later he busted me again, and I had gotten bailed out on my possession. So he says, he watched me from down the street. He watched me caught. He watched me polish off my shirt guard, and he watched me caught, but he couldn't actually see what I was doing, but he knew what I was doing. And then he watched me bend down on the car. I was going to take a hit, which was my last hit for 6 months. And and then he busted me. And I got real greedy. Usually I would carry my dope in my mouth and I'd swallow it. Well, this time I decided, damn, I'm tired of spending money on this and always having to swallow it. So I said, you know what, he's busy with them other people right now. Let me spit this over on the ground. So I did. I said, he'll never find it. Wrong. He found it and he said, Amber, what is this? And I said, I don't know. It looks like a rock. And he said, my. He said, it has your name all over it. And I said, I don't see Amber anywhere on that thing. And he said, well, you know what this means? And I said, yeah. I said, but you know what? I said, I'm getting real used to it. I said, besides, I need a vacation anyway. I've been out 2 weeks. So there I went again. And so the judge gave me, ordered me again, okay, and gave me, I forget what it was, 2 months to find a drug and alcohol program to go into. And he left all these cases running together. And I said, okay, so there's this place in San Pedro, and it's called Joint Efforts, and I had to go see these people. And he said, I want you back in court in a month with a progress report, at least, something showing me you have a bed waiting. And I said, yeah. So what did I do? 3 weeks and 6 days later, I called the guy in a panic because I had to be to court the next day and said, I got to see you. And he said, aren't you a little bit late? And I said, well, better late than never. And so he crammed me in that day and ended up sending a letter to the judge that I was incorrigible. I said, why do these people all keep thinking I'm incorrigible? That he said that I wouldn't work with them. So the judge said, I give you That was a month. I give you 1 more month, you know, to find a program. And it was a 1-year program that he wanted me in, a living program. He says, don't come back without the papers. So a month later, I hadn't went back to joint efforts. I hadn't looked on my own. So somebody said to me, Amber, you know, you got to go to court today. What are you going to do? And I said, well, he told me not to come back without the paperwork, so I'm not going. I said, he told me not to, so it made sense to me. So I went and got me another short dog and another $20 double up, and on my way I went. So I got caught for that, and I went back to jail again for another 6 months. And I kept getting 6 months, 6 months, and they make you do 4 of it. And I'm saying, you know, you'd think I'd be getting tired of it. So when I got out again, I'm on formal probation. You have to report. I go and see my probation officer, and in my probation, I could not go anywhere where alcohol was the chief item of sale. So if I get caught in a liquor store buying a pack of cigarettes, I'm in violation. I said, this is messed up. I can, you know, be around, you know, drug infested areas, da-da-da-da-da. I said, yeah. So, so I went and saw my PO, and I didn't like her. And she put a little star up in the corner of my paperwork, and actually before I went in there, I drank a short dog and did a hit. This is crazy. In the bathroom of the probation department, I did. I said, oh, does that mean I'm a good girl? And she said, no. She said, that means I'm going to watch you because I think you're going to run. And I went, how does she know I'm going to do this? You know, what do I have it stamped on my forehead or something? These people are, you know, they're really figuring me out, you know. So I said, no, not me. And so she gave me all my paperwork, you know, for my, you know, UA testing, for the number to call this, da-da-da-da-da, and you got to do this and you got to do that. I walked into the bathroom, did another hit, walked out the door. The first trash can I came to, I threw my paperwork in it, catch me when you can. So it took them 10 months, but they caught me. They sure did. And that was my last run. That was my last run. I had been on a 12-day run with no sleep. Every once in a while I'd eat a Twinkie or something. I'm serious. I was on a mission to kill myself or something. And I had 1 hit left in my mouth, and I had a short dog with me. And I'm going down the street, and I almost made it to the corner where I was going to go down to do my last hit. I almost made it, and here come a cop car. And I went, damn. So I hurry up, I'm trying to make, and they pull up, and I said, well, she hasn't missed me yet, so you know what? Last time they ran me, you know, they didn't find nothing. I'm okay, so I'll give them my real name for a change. That was a bad move. So he says, who are you? And I told him, and he says, you got any ID on you? I said, no, but you'll find me in your computer, which they always did. And so he ran me, and I knew it was not good when the doors started opening up. I went, damn, here I go again. I was only out for like about 10 months. I was out that time, 10 months. And I'm going, damn. And he says, would you put your hands behind your head? And I said, no. And he said, Amber, put your hands behind your head. And I said, no. And he says, so it was on. And there was 2 of them wanted me, and I told them it wasn't fair. Couldn't they do it one at a time? And and so they got me cuffed, and they put me in the car, and I said, what am I going to jail for? He said, you have a no bail. I said, for what? And he said, for possession. And I said, no, I did the time on that. Y'all crazy. And he said, well, he said, you have a no bail. So finally they tell me, here comes the field supervisor, they tell me it's a no bail for desertion of probation. I said, well, why didn't you tell me that? I said, I wouldn't have gave you such a fight. So I said, you know, besides, I said, I need a vacation anyway. I said, I've been up for too many days. You know what I'm saying? I said, these little short 4 months won't be nothing. And he said, you're going to get more than 4 months this time. He said, it's Chowchilla time for you. And I went, damn. I said, oh, okay. I said, if you say so. So I had those cops so mad that they just knew I had something on me, and I told them, I said, if I had anything on me, it's done gone, because I'd done swallowed it like usual. And I had a pipe in my tennis shoe, tongue in my tennis shoe, and they never did find them. And so they had me strip searched at the jail, and they didn't find it. And when she went out to tell me that she couldn't find anything, I flushed that down the toilet. And I went back to court, and my PO had told me, well, yeah, I'm recommending you for 16 months, but because it was my first violation with no new charges, I got 6 months again. And and I was in church in jail one day when it dawned on me, I was listening to the pastor, and I kept thinking, I'm sitting there and I kept thinking, why do I keep coming back? Why can't I leave alcohol and drugs alone? What is it? And the pastor said, and he was looking right at me because he was very familiar with my face. And he said, I can see somebody's back. And he says, he said, for all you sitting in here, he said, God loves you. And when he brings you to jail, as often as he does, he says it's his way of spanking you, and that was the first time that it dawned on me that the reason why I was still alive, the reason why I wasn't dead from some crazy thing I was doing out there, too much alcohol and drugs in the mixture I was throwing in my body, was the fact that God was watching over me. And I said, you know what? Why didn't I think of that? But so I said, okay. So I knew that if I was released on free dirt on my own accord, that the liquor store would be the first spot I hit, and the dope house would be the second. So I knew I had to do something. So I'm in a program, as most of you know, New Directions, and so she came through 2 weeks, about 2.5 weeks. She goes every Thursday there, and it's for women veterans or spouses of veterans or veterans' daughters. So when they hollered over the speaker, I said, I'm gonna go see what these people want. So I went out there, and it was God's way of saying, I'm going to get you in a program, because she interviewed me, they accepted me into the program. And so the little catch-22 was I had to make myself a custody release to the program, or I couldn't go. They didn't let you hit the street first and then go to the program, because they knew you won't. She knew I wouldn't do it. So I made myself a custody release, and that's how I got to New Directions. And I got out October 4th of last year. This is the first program I've been in, the first time I worked the 12 steps. And to the people who are newer than me and to the really newcomers, I can tell you this, that for being out there like I was for the years that I was out there, and knew I couldn't quit, that God was there for me, and he put the program in my life, and he put a 12-step program in my life, and that 12-step program put me in this room. And when I came to this room, all of you welcomed me with open arms and a whole lot of love. And most of you know I'm hard-headed and stubborn, and I get stuck on self-will, and I do. And and I say, well, why isn't this happening? And I'm tired of this, and I'll moan and groan and whine. But with you people in this room and with God, I have gotten my family back. I have gotten to talk to my little girl. Her dad's a rough customer, but I'll get there. And my little brother called me today, and I got to talk to him for an hour and a half, and I never thought that I'd ever talk to any of my family again, much less have them calling me, As a lot of you know, my family came down and gave me my year cake. They came from Oregon, Utah, and Orange County, and it was a very, very moving, touching moment for all of us, because it was as important to them as it was to me. And for all you newcomers, the only thing I can say is go to a lot of meetings. I go to like between 10 and 12 a week. That's part of the program, but but they make sure that we get her. And I have worked all the steps: get a sponsor, get a commitment, and don't be stubborn and hard-headed like me, and find your higher power, whatever that may be, and you'll find a lot of love in this room. Thank you, and God bless.
I think we got a great talk going on here. Thanks for watching the channel. Taper Dave here. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. And if that shows up, the gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.